My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a senior marketing manager for a tech startup in Austin. The air in my parents' dining room was thick with the smell of roasted turkey and the unspoken tension that always seemed to follow my sister, Jessica, into a room. We were halfway through Thanksgiving dinner, the wine flowing a little too freely, when Jessica, her face flushed with a triumphant glow, leaned across the table. Her husband, Mark, sat beside her, looking bored, his fork pushing around a piece of stuffing. Jessica, however, was beaming, fresh off a lengthy monologue about her son's gifted program and her latest home renovation. Then, her gaze, sharp and knowing, landed on me. "Oh, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, "still flying solo? I guess someone has to keep the Single Ladies Club alive. Don't you ever get tired of just, you?" The familiar sting hit me, a dull ache I'd grown accustomed to over the years. My smile tightened, a practiced reflex, as I took a slow sip of my water. My parents shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Mark just stared at his plate. For a split second, I considered my usual response, a vague shrug, a change of subject, anything to diffuse the situation. But this time, something inside me snapped. The years of quiet endurance, of letting her barbs glance off me, suddenly felt like a heavy weight I was done carrying. I knew, with absolute clarity, that this time, Jessica wasn't going to get away with it. This time I was going to speak my truth, and it would change everything between us. To understand why Jessica's words had such a predictable, yet infuriating, effect, you have to understand our history. Jessica, 2 years my senior, had always been the golden child, the one who effortlessly hit every perceived milestone. She married her college sweetheart, Mark, at 24, had her first child at 27, and moved into a sprawling suburban house that she meticulously curated into a picture of domestic bliss. Our parents, bless their hearts, were always quick to praise Jessica's choices, often holding them up as the ideal. "Jessica really has it all figured out," my mother would say, usually with a wistful glance in my direction. She settled down. I, on the other hand, had taken a different path. I threw myself into my career, moved to a new city, and spent my 20s climbing the corporate ladder. While Jessica was picking out nursery colors, I was negotiating million-dollar campaigns. My life was full, vibrant, and entirely my own, but in Jessica's eyes, and often in my parents', it was simply incomplete without a ring on my finger and a baby in my arms. Her mockery wasn't new, it was a recurring theme, a subtle undercurrent in every family gathering, every phone call. It was her way of asserting her perceived superiority, of reminding me that no matter what I achieved professionally, I was still, in her estimation, lacking. The first time her comments really stung was at her wedding. I was 22, fresh out of college, and still figuring out my path. Jessica, radiant in white, cornered me in the reception hall. "Sarah," she'd whispered, adjusting her veil, "I hope you find someone. It's just so much better when you have a partner to share everything with. All those late nights at work must get lonely." I remember forcing a smile, congratulating her, and then spending the rest of the evening feeling like a forgotten accessory, rather than a beloved sister. That detail mattered later, as I started to see a pattern in her behavior, a need to diminish my independence to elevate her own choices. Over the years, the jabs became more pointed, especially as my career took off. When I got my first promotion to marketing manager at 28, Jessica's congratulations were laced with a familiar sweetness. "That's wonderful, Sarah. So exciting to have a big career. Though, who will you share it with?" Mark and I celebrated his last promotion with a weekend getaway, just the two of us. It was always about the two of us, the implied contrast with my just me. I tried to explain that I celebrated my successes with friends, with travel, with the simple satisfaction of a job well done. But she never seemed to hear it, or perhaps she chose not to. A few months ago, the comments took a particularly ugly turn. I had been dating someone casually, a kind and interesting man named David. Things were progressing slowly, and I'd mentioned him to Jessica, cautiously optimistic. A week later, she called me, her voice buzzing with feigned concern. "Sarah, I ran into David at the grocery store," she said, her tone conspiratorial. He mentioned he's just looking for something casual. Are you sure you're not wasting your time? You know, at your age, you don't want to miss your window. My heart sank. I knew David had been honest with me, and I was fine with the pace, but Jessica's intervention, her deliberate attempt to sow doubt and inject urgency, felt like a betrayal. I ended things with David shortly after, not because of her words, but because her meddling had soured the budding connection. That was when the numbers stopped looking accidental. It wasn't just teasing, it was strategic. What I didn't understand yet was the depth of her insecurity. I saw her as the perfect one, living the life I sometimes envied for its apparent ease and stability. But Jessica, it turned out, saw something in my life that she coveted, something her carefully constructed world lacked. It wasn't until a conversation with my best friend, Chloe, that I started to truly recognize what was happening. Chloe, a sharp-witted lawyer, listened patiently as I recounted Jessica's latest dig about my single status. Sarah, Chloe said, stirring her coffee, she's not worried about you. She's worried about herself. Your independence, your freedom, your career success, it's a direct challenge to her narrative that settling down is the only path to happiness. She needs you to be unhappy and alone to validate her own choices. Chloe's words were like a key turning in a lock. It wasn't about me being single, it was about Jessica needing to reinforce her own identity by diminishing mine. She needed me to be a cautionary tale, not a successful, happy, unattached woman. The phrase settling down echoed in my mind. For Jessica, it was a badge of honor. For me, it had always felt like a trap, a premature closing of doors. I realized then that my preparation for this confrontation wasn't about gathering evidence, but about gathering my own self-worth and clarity. I had to stop seeing myself through her eyes and start seeing myself through my own. I had built a life I was proud of, one that offered me opportunities and experiences Jessica, tied to her suburban existence, could only dream of. So, as Jessica's smug expression settled on me at the Thanksgiving table, waiting for my usual deferential retreat, I took a deep breath. My parents were still looking at their plates, Mark was still pushing stuffing. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. My voice, when it came, was calm, clear, and steady, cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. Actually, Jessica, I said, looking her directly in the eye, my smile now genuine, not forced, I'm quite happy with just me. It means I don't have to pretend to be thrilled about someone else's career choices, or constantly worry if my financial security depends on someone else's mood. Unlike some, I built my own life, not just found a place in someone else's. The effect was instantaneous and profound. Jessica's triumphant smile faltered, then dissolved into a look of stunned disbelief. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. My mother gasped, a small, choked sound, and my father finally looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. Mark, for the first time all evening, actually stopped fiddling with his food and stared at his wife, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. The air suddenly crackled with a different kind of tension, one born of shock rather than passive discomfort. Jessica's face flushed a deep crimson, and her eyes narrowed, no longer triumphant, but wounded and furious. What is that supposed to mean, Sarah? She hissed, her voice low and venomous. Are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Jessica, I interrupted, my voice still even, though my heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I'm stating a fact. My life is my own creation. My success, my travels, my choices, they're all mine. I don't need a partner to validate them, and I certainly don't need to live through someone else's achievements or depend on their income to maintain my lifestyle. It's a freedom I value deeply. Jessica pushed her chair back, scraping it loudly against the hardwood floor. That's a low blow, Sarah. You're just jealous because you don't have what I have. Her voice rose, attracting the attention of my aunt and uncle at the other end of the table. Jealous? I asked, a slight laugh escaping me. Jessica, I travel the world for work and pleasure, I invest in my future, and I make decisions based solely on what's best for me, not what fits into someone else's schedule or budget. I have experiences you can only dream of. I'm not jealous. I'm simply pointing out that there's more than one way to live a fulfilling life, And perhaps my way isn't as lacking as you seem to need it to be. My mother finally found her voice. Girls, please. It's Thanksgiving, she pleaded, wringing her hands. My father, usually quiet, cleared his throat. Jessica, he said, his voice surprisingly firm, Sarah has a point. Your comments were out of line. Jessica looked utterly blindsided. She glared at my father, then at me, her face a mask of wounded pride and barely contained rage. She pushed herself fully away from the table. Fine, she snapped, grabbing her purse. If this is how you're going to be, I don't need to sit here and be insulted. She stormed out of the dining room, Mark scrambling to follow her, mumbling apologies to my parents. The front door slammed shut a moment later, leaving an echoing silence in its wake. The immediate aftermath was awkward. My aunt and uncle exchanged nervous glances. My parents looked bewildered, then slowly, a little sheepishly, at me. My mother finally said, Sarah, you were a bit harsh. But my father shook his head. No, Mary. Jessica deserved that. She's been doing it for years. That was a revelation in itself. My father, who rarely took sides, had seen it all along. Over the next few weeks, Jessica didn't call. My mother tried to mediate, sending me texts about how Jessica was very hurt and it was just a misunderstanding. I responded politely but firmly that I had simply stated my truth, and if Jessica couldn't handle that, then perhaps some distance was necessary. I didn't chase her, didn't apologize. I held my ground. The real shift came a month later, when my mother called me, her voice subdued. Jessica and Mark were having problems. Financial problems, specifically. Mark's job wasn't as stable as Jessica had always portrayed, and their dream home was becoming a significant burden. My mother admitted that Jessica had been increasingly stressed, and perhaps her constant need to highlight her perfect life was a desperate attempt to convince herself, and everyone else, that it was all fine. The facade was cracking. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a quiet sense of validation, and a profound sadness for my sister. But also, a liberation. The recurring phrase, settling down, no longer felt like an accusation or a judgment. It was just a choice, one of many. And I realized that the life I had built, the one I had created for just me, was exactly where I wanted to be. My plate, untouched by the drama, had been full of good food and, finally, a quiet, unburdened peace.